Shalom, shalom, Israel. Today I'm gonna focus on a lesson dealing with Hebrewisms. So, Hebrewisms is one of my favorite topics because Hebrewisms is one of the ways that you can use, or one of the mechanisms that you can use to identify who the Hebrew Israelites are by tracing their culture and their customs to the Hathawara Tanakh, or otherwise known as the Bible. So, the book that I'm going to use today to illustrate Hebrewism is a book that is well known to a lot of people. So, the book is called, in this print, Sold as a Slave. So, that's the name of it in this print, Sold as a Slave, right? But that's not the correct name of the book. So, the book was written near enough 2.5 to 300 years ago. And what happens with copyrights is that they run out after a period of time. I think it's 25 years. So after 25 years or so, the copyright runs out and then it becomes public. So anybody could use it, right? So the thing is, with this particular book, because it was so important, it was reprinted. So the reprint was also renamed Sold as a Slave. So let me give you the original name of the book written by the author. So the original name of the book is The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olaudah Equiano. He was forced to change his name. So his name is also Gustavus Vassa. Gustavus Vassa, right? So the name of the book also has another title. So one of the titles is The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olaudah Equiano, and the other title is The African, and it was written by himself. So it's an autobiography, right? So what makes this book very important as well is because it was written by him, it's seen as an eyewitness account or a primary source to an event. So it is eligible to be used in a court of law to demonstrate the circumstances of slavery and the circumstances that he lived in that time period. So it's a very important work. So first off, I'm going to show you an image of the brother that wrote the book. So this is an image of the brother that wrote the book, right? So it's got his original name, Olaudah Equiano. It's got the name that he was forced to use, which is Gustavus Vassa, and it's got the alternate title of the book, The African. Right. So let's just get straight into the book, and we're going to start to break it down. So first off, I'm going to go to page 1 of the book. I encourage everybody to buy this book, by the way, because it's got so much information contained in it. So on page 1, I'm going to show you. Is it page 1? Yeah, page 1. Right? That's page 1. So I want you to focus on the highlighted bits or the pages. When I show you the pages, it has got asterisks, which is like a star, what they call a star, because it's not a star, but that thing that looks like a star, yeah? That's what I want you to focus on. So anyway, it reads on page 1, that part of Africa, known by the name of Guinea, to which the trade for slaves is carried on, extends along the coast above 34,000 miles, 3,400 miles from Senegal to Angola. So that in itself is a Hebrewism, because when we push the word, we push the word that on the west coast of Africa it has Hebrew Israelites scattered amongst the peoples of Africa, and you find them from Senegambia to Angola. So this is basically confirming what we teach, because we teach that the slavers were looking for specific people to enslave, and those people were colloquially labeled Negroes, right? So we know Negroes is a code for Hebrew Israelites. So they were looking for the Negroes, and this is where they were sourcing them from Gambia, Salakia, from Senegal, otherwise known as Senegambia, from Senegal to Angola. So this is actually the same location that we state when we teach. And then from there, I'm going to jump to page 2. So now we're kind of going to get into the critical analysis of what he's saying as opposed to what the Bible is saying. So on page 2, I'm going to show you it, highlight it there. Page 2, it states, adultery, however, was sometimes punished with slavery or death, a punishment which I believe is inflicted on or throughout most of the nations of Africa. So I think I have a precept for that, which is Exodus 20 and 14. Let me get that. Exodus 20 on page 14. And it reads, Salakia, Exodus chapter 20 and verse 14. And it reads, thou shalt not commit adultery. Right? That's plain and simple. And then the other one, because I have another one as well, which is Deuteronomy 5 and 18. Let me bring that out. Deuteronomy 5, verse 5, chapter 5, and verse 18. And it reads, neither shalt thou commit adultery. Right? So those two precepts are corresponding with what was written in the book. Right? So it's a Hebrewism because it's validating what he said in his book is validated the Hathorah. So now we're going to jump to page 3. Let me show you that. Yeah. So you're going to see like a little asterisk there, page 3. So that bit there. Let me just see it. Yep. Page 3. Their mode of marriage is thus. Both parties are usually betrothed when young by their parents. So even the term betrothed, that's a well-known concept within the Bible. So betrothed is when two people have agreed to marry, or two sets of families, parents have agreed that their children are going to marry. So that is well understood. So therefore, even though they haven't consummated the marriage, they're still you could use the term engaged to each other. So another man cannot lie with a betrothed woman, even though she may be a virgin, because that would be seen as adultery. That would be an abominable act. So right, so that's what that reads. Let me see if there's anything else. Oh yes. So now they're gonna go into a bit of the ceremony. I showed you the page already. On this occasion, a feast is prepared, and the bride and bridegroom stand up in the midst of all their friends and family, who are assembled for the purpose, while he declares she is thenceforth to be looked upon as his wife. Right? So what that's basically confirming is that it's not the marriage ceremony is not actually the way that we believe it is. The marriage ceremony is when everybody is informed and acknowledges that the man and the woman are united in marriage, and also when the rights, which would be the dowry, fees, and the man and the woman coming together. So sometimes that could happen without the formalities as well, because actually the marriage is the man and the woman coming together lawfully. So let's get the precept for that. Page 3. Marriages. Um, Genesis 29 20 to 23. Uh, Genesis chapter 29, verses 20 to 23, I believe I said. Let me check again. Yeah, 29, 20 to 23. Right. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, otherwise known as Raka'ala. So Raka'ala means path or power, or power's path. And they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had to her. So he was very much in love with her. So the time flew basically. It appeared as if there was no time at all, right? Verse 21. And Jacob said unto Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled. So basically, he completed the 7 year period, and he requested his wife to be given to him so he could come into her. So listen to this now, verse 23. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. So that's corresponding with what the normal practice was according to Sold as a Slave, according to the book Sold as a Slave, written by Olaudah Equiano. So it's lining up. Right. So yeah. Let me read verse 23. Verse 23. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter. So this he there would be Laban. So Laban took Leah his daughter in place of Raka'ala. So Leah in Hebrew would be La'ah, and La'ah means no or do not. That's literally what her name means. His daughter, and brought her to him, to Jacob, and he went in unto her. Right. So the whole point of this is I'm just illustrating the whole marriage ceremony. So the consummation of it would be when you go in unto her, and then the two will become one flesh. So that's what happened, right? Um, so then we're gonna go into page 4. So there's something on page 4 as well. So let me see if I can find that. See what's going on with that. Oh, okay. So let me just show you it quickly. Page 4. Right. So this basically is just illustrating that when a person is married, the wife is seen as the property of the husband, right? So when we say property, we don't mean it in the sense of, oh, I own this shoe and I own this thing and I could break it and I could treat it any way I want to. It doesn't mean that. But what it means that you are adjoined to that person. So nobody else has authority over that wife but the husband. Right. So that order is listed out in the New Testament where it says the head of Christ is Yahweh, the head of the man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and then the head of the children is the wife. So that's the Yahweh's order. Right. So after bringing that up, let me jump to page 5. So on page 5, right, so all these things I'm showing you here are what is seen as Hebrewisms. Right? So on page 5, so like I said, focus on the highlighted bit with the asterisk next to it. But you could look at all of them, but that's what I'm focusing on. Um, page 5. The dress of both sexes is nearly the same. It's not the same, it's nearly the same, because they were wearing gowns at that time. It generally consists of a long piece of calico or muslin. So calico or muslin is another way of saying cotton or linen. But this is the point here now. This is usually dyed blue, which is our favorite color, right? So now, we get a piece up for that. Because remember, we're dealing with Hebrewism, so we're comparing and contrasting what he has in his book, which is an eyewitness account, primary source, to what the scriptures has. So on Numbers chapter 15 and verse 38 is a well-known precept. I'm going to bring it out. Numbers chapter 15 and verse 38 reads, "Speak unto the children of Israel, and bid them that they make them fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generation, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders a ribbon of blue." Right. So, so this is a commandment. Actually, let me just check it. Um, yeah, it's a commandment. So this is something that we're supposed to do forever, right? We're supposed to do this forever, right? So I don't have on my fringes today, but what I do have, and I'm going to show you, is they call it zits, right? And if you look here, there's a ribbon of blue. So I have this on most of my jeans. So even if I have on a top that doesn't have fringes, I'm covered because I've got my zits on. So that's linking that up, but there's another precept again dealing with the color blue. So Numbers, and then we get it. Exodus 39 1 to 2. Let me get that. Um, so this is the book of Exodus, chapter 39, verses 1 to 2. And it reads, "And the blue and purple and scarlet they made cloths of service to do service in the holy place, and made a holy garment for Aaron as the Lord commanded Moses." Verse 2, "And he made the ephod of gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen." So the fine twine could also represent the fringes on the end because they were twined. They were twisted or twined. Yeah? So that's dealing with the color blue. Now, if you notice, they've called other colors as well, purple and scarlet. So the purple, the scarlet, and the blue, any one of those colors can be used literally as a fringe, as a ribbon, right? So if you see people with fringes, you see that the ribbon sometimes is a slightly different shade or slightly different color, but they're all acceptable. And then I think I have another one again, so I'm going to read that one as well. Exodus 36, 35, and then 37. So let me get that. Because we're dealing with the color blue as a Hebrewism. So we're looking at those colors and we're linking it up with what it says in the book. So um, 35 to 37. So let me get that. So this is the book of Exodus, chapter 35, verses. This is the book of Exodus, chapter 36, verses 35, and then jump to 37. Verse 35. "And he made a veil of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen." So that would be the fringes. So if you notice, even with the curtains, at the end of the curtains, you'll see fringes on them as well. And then I'm going to jump to verse 37, and it reads, "And he made a hanging for the tabernacle door of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen." So the fine twined linen would be basically the fringes, right? So that's just confirming that blue was important to us, and he said in his book that in their culture, blue was their favorite color. So that's a Hebrewism as well. So then from there, I jumped to page 5. What's on page 5? Anything important on page 5? Page 9, sorry, Salakia, page 9. Let me get that. page 9, so look where the asterisk is or the marks are at the side. So on page 9 it reads, the West India planters prefer the slaves of Benin or Igbo. So straight away, that's a Hebrewism, because Benin is a Hebrew word that means Ban Ayan, and Ban Ayan is basically the son of the eye, or the son of the eyeball, or the eyeball son, meaning the favored son, because that's literally what it means. Because the thing that your eye looks upon is the thing that your heart yearns for, or one loves, and that's why Yahweh looks upon us, because we're His beloved as well. So that's another way of saying beloved, actually. And then the other word, Ebo. So Ebo is basically, it's spelled differently here, but Ebo is actually Iba or Eba, right? And Eba is a language, so it's translated as Hebrew, but it's a language, but it's also a people, because the chosen seed descended from Eva. So it's actually a line of people. So we're Hebrews. Hebrews is just another way of saying sons of Eva. That's what we are. So the two words are Hebrew. So that's the Hebrewism. And then, right. So it also states that the West India planters prefer Benin, um, the beloved sons, or son of the eye, or son of the eyeball, or Igbo, which is basically Iba, which means crossed over Hebrew, to those of any other part of Guinea. So they took from other parts of Guinea, but they preferred them. So they're going to explain why they preferred them. For their hardiness, intelligence, integrity, and zeal. Those benefits are felt by us in the general healthiness of the people and in their vigor and activity. I might have added too in their comeliness. So comeliness is a word that's found in the scriptures as well. So comeliness links to attractiveness, handsomeness, or being well framed. So actually the root of comeliness is balance, because you're symmetrical then. So symmetry or symmetrical means that you're balanced. So your left side sort of matches your right side, and it creates an appeal or attractiveness or comeliness. So these people were known for that. And then there's another bit here that's marked, so I'm going to go into that. I remember while in Africa to have seen three Negro children. So Negro is a code as well, because Negro is identified as Hebrews. So that's in the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary explains that. So it explains the children of Ham, the dark races, the children of Ham, and then it says not the Negroes, but Cam and Cush and whoever else, but not Punt and whoever else, but not the Negroes. So the Negroes are always identified as a separate dark race, but juxtaposed against the children of Ham, but not being children of Ham. So that's a Hebrewism as well. And then it states the three Negro children who were tawny and another quite white. Right. So I'm gonna have to touch on this. I don't want to, but I have to, because I have to explain this. Because we don't deal with color, we deal with the spirit, right? So we test the spirit, and sometimes like it happened to me several parts where I presume somebody based on appearance, but then when I test the spirit, I realized that actually I may have been wrong, right? So I repented. I made a repentative statement straight away, because I may have been wrong. But dealing with this statement that he made, I have to touch on colorism a bit. So colorism now is a concept of where Europeans attach the value on our people based on the shade of color that they possess, because what they attempted to do, which is listed out in the Willie Lynch letters, is to divide and conquer a mass group by subdividing them into other groups. So one of the mechanisms they use is the shades of color. Because we are speckled bird and we have different shades of colors, what they did, they attach value to the shade of color you possess and add and giving a value to the lighter shades as opposed to the darker shades, right? Because they have no color. So if somebody have a lighter shade of melanin or of hue, they would elevate them as opposed to the brothers that have the darker shade. So that's what colorism is. But what this is listing out is when you're in your right mind, when you're looking at things from your right perspective, you will see it the other way around. So they saw these three Negroes, which the code is coded, but it's identifying them as Hebrew by saying Negroes, right? And it said that they regarded by himself and the natives in general, the people in general, as far as related to their complexions, as deformed. So it was seen as something that was strange or deformed. So I have a precept for that as well. So let me bring that up, page 9. Um, yeah, Genesis 24. Well, you would know anyway, but I'm going to put it up. Genesis 25, 24 to 26. Right, so this is a well-known story that most Hebrew Israelite accounts pull out when necessary. So at the moment it's necessary right now. So this is the book of Genesis, chapter 25, verses, let me get the precise one that I came up, 24 to 26. So this is the book of Genesis, chapter 25, verse 24 to 26, verse 24. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, her being Rebekah in this instance, behold, there were twins in her womb, which is a normal occurrence. Verse 25. And the first twin, came out Adawam, which is translated as red, all over like a hairy garment. And they called his name Esau. So Esau means wasted away as he. In Hebrew, it would be Aishawa or Ashashawa. But what I have to point out is that when it says the first came out red, that's the color red. There's only one color for red in Hebrew, Adawam. So then they had to describe what shade of red it was. So how they did that was by naming an object that was the similar or if not the same color as the red they were referring to. So in this instance, it was a hairy garment. So the hairy garment was a um, um, goatskin tents that they dyed blood red with the blood of a Kermaeus worm, right? So that was the shade of red. So when it says like a hairy garment, that's what it's referring to. And they call his name Aishashawa, which is wasted away. So basically, most Adawam children, when they first come out, they're it's traumatic. Coming the birthing process is traumatic. So they come out very very red and they're crying and they're bright scarlet red, and then eventually, when they tone down a bit, that's when you see the translucent skin. So basically, it's actually explaining the process. So it came out red, and then over a slight period of time, then it toned down, and then you saw that it was actually a transparency in the skin, and you could see everything through the skin, the veins and everything else. Yeah. Um, was that it? 26. Up to 26. Yeah, 26. I only 26. Verse 26. And after that came his brother out, which would be Yaakov, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, which is the reason why they call him Yaakov, because it means heel tripper or supplanter. That's what Yaakov actually means. And Isaac was 60 years old when she bare them. Right, so Isaac was 60, I believe. Yeah, when she bare them, when Rebecca bare them. So the point is, the reason why I read out 26 is because verse 26, you notice when they're talking about your Iquab, no color is mentioned. Because he was the same color or hue or melanated as every single human being was at that present time. So there was no translucent person born at that time. That's the point of that. But it's a Hebrewism as well because it was seen as deformed. So when she had the child, which was Esau, she had to inquire of the Lord as to why and what it was. Then let me see. Um, page 11 and 12. So let me get that. 11 and 12. Yeah, page 11. Remember, focus on the highlighted bits, especially with the asterisks next to it. But all of the highlighted bits can be observed as well. But that's what I'm dealing with. So it reads, accordingly, he falls on his neighbor and a desperate battle ensues. If he prevails and takes prisoners, he gratifies his avarice, which is another way of saying extreme greed, by selling them. But if his party be vanquished and he falls into the hands of the enemy, he is put to death. Now, this is a common practice amongst all people groups. So this was taking place even amongst Israel. So there's in Deuteronomy there was scripture that was written. I think it's Deuteronomy 12 or 15. Let me check it. But there were scriptures that were written that was giving instructions as to how to treat your Hebrew slaves or servants, because there's no significant difference between a servant and a slave, to be honest, right? 15, Deuteronomy 15, right? So it was a common practice, right, at that time. The only difference between what we call slavery or servitude and what happened to the Hebrew Israelites is that what happened to the Hebrew Israelites was called chattel slavery. And chattel slavery is where you remove the human rights or the humanity of your slave. So no other people prior to chattel slavery, actually did that. So they would, of course, subdue the slave and keep them in a lower state, but they would not remove the humanity of the slave. That occurred in chattel slavery. So that's the new form of slavery. But prior to that, all people groups had a form of slavery. But anyway, that's not the issue. The issue is this now. For as he has been known to foment a quarrel, it is thought dangerous to let him survive, and no ransom can save him. So this is the issue, right? The issue is you have a slave or you've captured an enemy, right? And the concept was you can redeem that person, you can purchase him back. Um, though all other prisoners may be redeemed. So let me just show you it again. Right. I think it's somewhere. Let me check. Yeah, that one there. All other prisoners may be redeemed. So that's a Hebrewism, because what that's doing, that's actually explaining. Let me see if I get it again. Yeah, that's actually explaining something that we bring out quite often in Deuteronomy 28 and 68, which I'm going to quickly pull out. I'm going to read the whole thing, but I'm just going to pull it out because I want to show you something. 28 and 68. Right, so when you look at the last bit of the verse, it's marked up a lot, but when you look at the last bit of the verse, somewhere there, it says, no man shall buy you, I think. I'm seeing it in reverse. Let me just check. Yes. and no man shall buy you, right? So the word in the Hebrew would be no man shall redeem you. It would be quana. So quana, it should be translated as redeem. But what they did, they changed the redeem to buy you, right? Because you're actually buying the person back from somebody that has captured them or has imprisoned them, and which is also what bail is. When you bail somebody, you're redeeming that person from prison on a bond. See, it's the same concept. So that's a Hebrewism. Then let me see where we are now. Um, oh, religion. So that's on page 12. Yeah, there we go. So like I said, focus on the highlight bits with the asterisk to the side. Hopefully you can see it. Right. Let me read it. Um, those prisoners which were not sold or redeemed, we kept as slaves. Right. So I've explained what redeemed is. So what he's actually saying is when a person is captured, so you had a war, you had a battle, you collected the prisoners, right? When you bring them back, if they're not redeemed, meaning that they're not seen as valuable to the tribesmen, or the tribesmen are not capable or able of purchasing them back, they would be converted into slaves, meaning servants. Because remember, this term slave is a European term. It means Slavic. So we didn't use that word slave. We would call them servants basically, which is what abad means, right? Abad means servant. So I'm actually an abad to Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. So, but anyway, be that as it may. So it says, listen to this: their food, clothing, and lodging were nearly the same as theirs, as ours, basically. Except that they were not permitted to eat with those who were freeborn. So the significance of that is that when you read Acts, I think it was Peter and some of the apostles were eating with some of the Gentiles, meaning the Israelite foreigners, and then some of the other Judeans um, reprimanded him for that because it was their custom not to eat with the Goyim or strangers or heathens or foreigners. So that's an Hebrewism as well. So what he's saying here is that they treated them more or less the same as they would treat a countryman, only they would not eat with them. So that's the Hebrewism. And then what else? As to religion, the natives, so native just means countrymen, right? Um, one could argue, you could use the term Ami Yasha'ala or Bani Shal Yasha'ala, children of Israel, right? But the natives believe that there is one creator of all things, right? So that's in Deuteronomy 6 and 4, I think. Let me just check because I don't want to misquote it. Alright. Yeah. So it's in Deuteronomy 6 and 4. And what it reads, I'm going to read it, is Shammai Yasha'ala. Yahweh Alahayanawa Yahweh Akkad. And what that states in English, I'm going to read it in English now. Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord Yahweh, our God, power, Alahayanawa, is one Lord. Yeah? Meaning, He's one power. Right? Um, yeah. So that coincides with what he wrote in his book. So that's a Hebrewism as well. And there's something else that he's got here. So I'm going to read this as well. They believe he governs events especially our deaths or captivity. Right. So in other words, he judges us. So I can get that quickly, a precept for that. I didn't write a precept for it, but I can get one quickly in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 6 to 8. Verse 6. The Lord Yahweh killeth and maketh alive. He bringeth down to the grave and bringeth up. Verse 7. The Lord Yahweh maketh poor and maketh rich. He bringeth low and he lifteth up. Verse 8. He raises up the poor out of the dust and lifteth up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among princes. So the prince's hair would be Yasha'Allah, because that's what it means, his prince of power. And to make them, Yasha'Allah, his prince of power, inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, Yahweh, and he hath set the world upon them. Right, so it talks about inheriting the throne of glory. So let me go quickly. So this is not, these are not precepts that I've written down, but these are precepts that I know, which I don't know a lot. I'll be the first to tell you. But the few that I do know, this is one of the few that I do know. So let me get it out. Um, yeah. So this is the book of Romans chapter 9 and verse 4. Who are Israelites? Yasha'Allah. To whom pertaineth the adoption. So the adoption would be, i.e., the northern kingdom that was cast out of the nation of Israel because of their idolatry, right? They adopted back in. The Gentiles, which is the Hebrew Israelite foreigners, they are adopted back in. The people in the Maccabee periods that took up the Greekish fashion, all these people are eligible to be adopted back in because they are actually Israelites. So it states, let me read that again, chapter 9 and verse 4, Romans chapter 9 and verse 4, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption, I explain what that is, and the glory. So the glory is actually linking up with what I read before in 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 8. The glory is relating in this scripture the throne of glory. So that pertains to us. And I'm going to read the whole thing. And the covenant, and the giving of the law, and the service of God, which is what I said earlier. I'm a servant of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. And the promises. So the promises would be everything that the Most High said in the scriptures. Every single thing that he said in the scriptures is a promise. Why? Because he doesn't say anything void. So whatever he says is a statement of fact. That's what a promise is. A promise is I'm stating a fact in the future now, right? Because word is born. So if the Most High said it, it is, right? So yeah, so that's that. Then I'm gonna jump to verse 13. Do I have it recorded? Yes, I do. So verse 13. Come on there, right? Verse 13 it reads, we compute the year from the day on which the sun crosses the line. So basically, he lived close to the equator. That's why his surname was Equiano. So Equiano is Latin for equator or equivalent, right? So he lived pretty close to the equator. So as a result of that, when the sun crossed the line, the equatorial line, that would be what they would use to compute the year. But check this now. So this is the important bit now. And on its setting that evening. So which means that the year and the day is starting from the setting of the sun, which links up with I think Nehemiah. Let me get that. Is it Nehemiah? I think it's Nehemiah. Let me get it. This is the book of Nehemiah, chapter 13 and verse 19. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark, so that's linking up with the setting of the sun or the evening, because that's what evening means, right? So let me read it again. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark in the evening, before the Sabbath, right? So this is just before the sun went down to the point where the new day started, right? So just before it began to be dark, before the Sabbath, I commanded them that the gates should be shut and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. So that's just proving the significance or the time frame, the timing. So that's a Hebrewism because different people they they time the start of the day differently. So some in the morning when the sun rises, some would be at midnight. These are different times. So different cultures had different ways in which they would determine the start of the day. But his lines up with the Hebrew way of determining, which is sunset. So sorry, not sunset. Yeah, sunset evening, which is when the sun's going down. So I think that it's not sun. I think sunset would be the wrong term, but when the sun's going down, that would be evening. And then let's see, we talk about full moons and stuff like that. We talk about when any young animals are killed. So when we offer up a sacrifice to Yahweh, Ba'asham Yahushai, it would be either a goat or a lamb, preferably a lamb, but goats are acceptable as well. Also pigeons, doves as well. But it would be a 1 year old, no older than 1 year, and preferably the firstborn as well, because all firstlings, all firstborn, anything that opens the matrix, whether it be the first fruits, whether it be the first grain, whether it be the first animal born, whether it be the first human born, they all belong to Yahweh. Well, everything belongs to Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, but He's taken them. They are joined to Him according to His word. So that's linking up with that as well. And then we're going to jump to page 14 and 15. So let me show you that. In particular, the one with the asterisk next to it. Yeah, so when I do this, I want you lot to take a screenshot or freeze the video and take a little look of it on the information. So page 14 it reads, our offerings are eaten with bitter herbs. So this lines up with the Passover as well. I'm not even going to pull it out here. Let me see. Do I have it? I think I might. Yes, I do. Um, Genesis 20 and 18. So I might as well just go into it because I've got it written. So we go into it. Genesis 20 and 18, I believe. Yes, Genesis 20 and 18. So we go into that. So look here, it's Leviticus 20 and 18. So look here. So when you go into Leviticus 20 and 18, wait a minute, something wrong here. It's not linking up. It's not linking up. So anyway, let me just read that again just to confirm what it was. Yeah, so So that could be found in Exodus actually. And it could definitely be found in Exodus, which refers to the Passover. Um, I remember I mentioned it in Sabbath recently. I made mention of it. So let me see if I can find it. Right, got it. Let's see. Um, yeah. So in the book of Exodus, chapter 12 and verse 8. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, with dealing with the Passover, roasted with fire, and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. So that's linking up with what Brother mentioned here. Also, it reads, we practice circumcision like the Jews, and made offerings and feasts on that occasion in the same manner as they did. So these are Hebrewisms, because what he's doing, he's likening his customs to those of the Jews. So basically, what he's actually doing is comparing and contrasting his culture and his customs with those found in the Bible. And that's the whole point of Hebrewism. So he's actually doing what I'm doing as well, which is comparing and contrasting the customs and manners of his people, right, with what is found in the Bible. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh yes. So there's something important here. It states that like them also. So he's likening this custom also. So in other words, he's calling it a Hebrewism. Like them also, our children were named from some event, some circumstance, or fancied foreboding. So foreboding is another way of saying prophecy, right? Because what it is, you're prophesying that something's going to happen before it happens at the time of their birth, right? And then he goes on to say, I was named Olaudah, which in our language, listen to this, signifies vicissitude or fortunate, also one favored, right? So Olaudah means fortunate, one favored, or vicissitude, right? So let's check this now. So now I'm going to go into, I think I've got that. This is down. Um, maybe I know to find it. It's in Genesis. It's in Genesis. Um, find it. Yo, here it is. 29 and 35. Sorry about that, Israel, but when you have to read for yourself, it's a bit more complicated than when you've got people reading to you. Right, so this is the first one I'm going to show you. So I want you guys to screenshot all of these highlighted names because I've got information there, right? I've got the paleo and I've got the breakdown of what the names mean. So if you look at the highlighted part of the verse, you're going to see where the names are derived from. Right, so let me read out what I want to read first. So the brother's name is Olaudah, and according to him, Olaudah means fortunate or one favored. Right, so listen to this now. Yahawada, right? Let me show you it again. Yahawada, right? Which is where the term Jew comes from, by the way. So Yahawada means I praise the Lord. Well, actually, it would mean praise Yahweh, right? It wouldn't be the Lord, it would be Yahweh. So praise Yahweh, right, is actually a derivative. His name is the derivative of praise Yahweh. So praise Yahweh is Yahawada. His name is Allah Wada. So his name would be praise power, right? So his name is Hebrew, but also his name is the derivative of Yahawada, which means Yahweh's praise, right? So his name is power praise. So if you're praised by Yahweh, that would mean that you are fortunate and you are favored, literally. So that's a Hebrewism as well. Let me see what else. Right, so let me show you the other names. So I showed you some there. I want to show you some of the other ones. Yeah, because all the names have significance. So you can see them there underneath, highlighted. So you've got the paleo, you've got the written out, and then the highlighted bit of the verse indicates why they're named in the name that they have. And there's one other one that I need to show you. The reason why I need to show you the other one now is because in reference to when you made a comment of let me use this word when they're named, he made a comment where he said some circumstance or fancied foreboding. So foreboding kind of sounds bad, not bad, but ominous. It means like a warning, right? So this is somebody that had that name. Now I'm going to show you the one on top, and this is the breakdown of the name. So Benjamin or Banyamian was actually called Ban Awanaya. Ban Awanaya. So the reason why he was called Ban Awanaya is because when when Raka'ala or Rachel had him, she died shortly afterwards. So when he was born, she called him Ban Awanaya, which means son of my affliction or son of my sorrow. But then the ICOR corrected his name, in other words, changed the foreboding name into a fortunate name by renaming him Banyamyan, which means son of the right hand. Well, I just brought this up just to illustrate that what he said there is also a Hebrewism. So all I'm doing is just linking up the things that he's written, which are first-hand accounts of his life, with what the Bible is actually saying. And more often than not, everything he's saying is found in the scriptures. Um, there's something here about yeah, I'll read it because it's asterisk. It says, I have been remarked that the natives of this part of Africa are extremely clean. So he mentioned the part of Africa in the first page, which is from Senegambia to Angola. So the people there were extremely clean. This necessary habit of decency was with us a part of religion, and therefore we had many purifications and washings, indeed almost as many, and used on the same occasions, if my recollection does not fail me, as the Jews. So even this, he's likening his customs and culture to what is found in the Bible. And then it goes on to say, those that touched the dead at any time were obliged to wash and purify themselves before they could enter a dwelling house. Every woman, too, at certain times, when they were seeing their flowers, was forbidden to come into a dwelling house or touch any person or anything we ate. Right? And then it goes on to say, in consequence of which I was obliged to be kept out with her And he explains why. In a little house made for that purpose, till offering was made, and then we were purified. That would be the sin offering. So the reason why he would be placed outside with her is because he loved his mom, and he could not help but not touch her. So ultimately, he'd end up touching her when she was unclean. So then both of them would have to be placed outside until the washing, the purification, and the sin offering was made. So check this now. Let me get the piece up for this one now. Um, page 14. I think this is the one starting with Leviticus 28. Let me get that. That makes sense to me. So this is the book of Leviticus, chapter 20 and verse 18. And it reads, yeah. And if a man shall lie with a woman having her sickness, her flowers, and shall uncover her nakedness, and have discovered her fountain, the blood, and she have uncovered the fountain of her blood, and both of them shall be cut off from among their people. So that was one of the most abominable, not the most, but it was an abominable act, because that could place you outside of the nation. That could turn you into a Hawaiian then, basically. What was the other one? Leviticus 15, 17 to 19. That. The book of Leviticus, chapter 15, verses 17 to 19, and it reads, And every garment and every skin whereon is the seed of copulation shall be washed with water and be unclean until the even. Right? So we're dealing with cleanliness. Verse 18, The woman also with whom man shall lie, with seed of copulation, they shall both bathe themselves in water and be unclean until the even. Verse 19. And if a woman have an issue, and her issue is in her flesh, be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days. Now this occurred to Miriam as well. 7 days, and whosoever touch her shall be unclean until the even, which is what Olaudah said used to happen to him when he was a child. Is there any more? Um, what can I say? That's what I say. Yeah. But you can go into the chapter dealing with leprosy as well. That's in Numbers. Um, yeah. But basically that's a Hebrewism as well. So let me go. Um, oh, this is important. Right. So I made a note here. So where you see the writing, there. Right. That's significant. So check this. Listen to this. In consequence of which I was no. Though we had no place of public worship, we had priests and magicians or wise men. So they've likened the word magician with the word wise men. And this is significant because the three wise men that saw the stars and realized that Yahushua HaMashiach had actually been born, and they came to give him gifts of frankincense, myrrh, and gold. They were listed as magi. So magi is the root of the word magician, and they're also listed as the three wise men. So this is also a Hebrewism as well, the way this is phrased. But the importance of what he said, no place of public worship, because the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and we are commanded to worship and make our sacrifices there. So once the temple is destroyed, we can't make certain sacrifices because you have to make sacrifices in Jerusalem, in Mount Zion, according to the Bible. So that's a Hebrewism as well. Let me see what else. Okay, here. Oh wait, sorry. Can you see it? Right. So the significance of that is they wore beards. Right. So that is a well-known precept. So I'm going to bring that out. So there's one in Leviticus 19, I believe. Yeah. Leviticus 19, verse 27, and it reads, "Ye shall not round the corners of your heads, meaning you shall not mar your hairline, and neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy bed." Right? So you can't shape up the bed. If you look, you can't really shape up the bed. You just have to let it do its thing. Right? And then when you go into, actually, I didn't read that correct. So I should have read first and foremost the first verse because it explains, or the first two verses, because it explains who it's referring to. So in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verses 1 and 2, it states, "And the Lord Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto all the congregation of the children of Israel." Right? So that's who and what Leviticus 19 and 27 is referring to. So when you go into Leviticus 21, because there's one in 21 as well, it states, the first one verse states, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Speak unto the priests, the sons of Aaron." So chapter 21 is specifically addressed to the priests, the sons of Aaron, not even the sons of our Moses, the sons of Aaron, right? And it states, um, in verse 5, "They shall not make baldness." So the priests, the sons of Aaron, shall not make baldness upon their head, neither shall they shave off the corner of their beard, nor make any cuttings in the flesh. Right? But the point is the beard. So the significance of what he said, or the Hebrewism of what he said, is that they had beards. Right? The priests had beards. It links up with what the scripture says. Alright, so what page are we on now? I think page 18, but let me just check. Yes. So this one, it just says to read, so I'm just going to read it. Page 18. So I'll show you. I'll read it. This one here. Hopefully you're seeing it. Right. Page 18. Like the Israelites, his Hebrewism again, because he's likening what he's about to say to the Israelites. Like the Israelites, in their primitive state, I don't like the term primitive, but is what it is. I prefer early stage. In their primitive state, our government was conducted by our chiefs, our judges, our wise men, and the elders, and the head of a family with us enjoyed a similar authority over his household with that which is ascribed to Abraham and the other patriarchs. So I don't even need to break it down because he actually broke it down because exactly what he's saying is exactly how it's listed with Abraham and the patriarchs and the heads of the family and the judges and the chiefs. They had the same custom. And let's see what else. Oh yeah, so I noted this one here as to the difference of color. So Hebrewism, but also he's making an observation based on what he's observed in his country, what he's observed in all the countries that he was enslaved and brought to, which is some of the islands. He was brought to Barbados, he was brought to Montserrat. I'm not sure if there's any others, but I know at least those two he went to. I know he went to the Americas as well, right? And I know he went to England as well, right? So all those countries that he went to, he made observations, and this is what he's saying here. The difference of color between Eboan, so Eboan is another way of saying Ebos, which is another way of saying Hebrews. So the difference of color between Eboan, Ebos, Hebrews, Africans, Hebrew Africans, and the modern Jews. So we know who the modern Jews are because there's an ish at the end of the Jew, right? So that's what he's saying. So he's, even at this point in time in history, he's observing the difference between what they call modern Jews and Eboan Africans, meaning Hebrew Africans, because that's what Eboan means. Um, right. But then let's see, that's page 18, and then from 18 jump to 31 and 32. Let me get that, page 31 and 32. Right, page 31, and it reads, all the nations and people I had hitherto passed through resembled our own in their manners, customs, and language. So, in other words, when he was grabbed up and it was bringing him to the coast, most of the lands and villages and places that he passed through, the people had the same manners, the same customs, and the same language. But I came at length to a country, the inhabitants of which differed from us in all these particulars. So what happened? What he's explaining now is that amongst the nations that he passed through, he came across a nation, right, that had different customs, different manners, and a different language. Now, he's not referring to the way they look, he's referring to their manners and customs. So, what he's actually saying here is that all skin folk is not kinfolk. That's what he's saying here. Listen to this now. The inhabitants of which differed from us in all those particulars, all the things he mentioned. I was very much struck with this difference, especially when I came among a people who did not circumcise, right, and eat without washing their hands. So that was a custom. It's not a law, but it was a custom. They cooked also in iron pots, right? But listen to this, and had European cutlasses and crossbows. So what the reason why he mentioned European cutlasses and crossbows is because they would have had their own cutlasses and their own crossbows, right? But the reason why he used the adjective European is because it was of a different design and a different quality. So it was an observable difference, which he's noting here, um, which which were unknown to us and fought with their fists among themselves. So in other words, that's also something that's against our laws as well, because we have to love our brother as we love ourselves. And there's a scripture that says that you're not supposed to be a striker. I think it's in the New Testament. You're not supposed to be a striker, meaning you're not supposed to hit one of your own people or brother. There's ways that you address issues amongst each other, but you don't strike them and you don't fight them, right? So this is what he listed as different. And also he went on to say the women were not so modest as ours, for they eat and drank and slept with their men, right? So if you look at the B, which is known as the Bayat, it's actually the 10th floor plan. And in the 10th floor plan, the men were separated from the women. So what this is saying is that they didn't have that custom. So everything they did was different to our way. And let's see what else. Yeah, this is important. In some of those places, the people ornamented themselves with scars. And it's funny because I just read that precept in Leviticus 21 and 5, I think it was, where it says no etching or mark engravings on the skin. So it says, in some of those places, the people ornamented themselves with scars, like Killimonger in Wakanda, how he had all those marks, right? They did that, and likewise filed their teeth very sharp. They wanted sometimes to ornament me in the same manner, but I would not suffer them, meaning that he would not allow them to do it, because that was an abomination. So that's why he wouldn't allow them to do it. And then on the next page it says he might sometimes be among a people who did not. So in other words, the way how he got out of doing it was that he told them that when he goes back amongst his people, who did not disfigure themselves as I thought they did, right? So, in other words, he saw it as a disfigurement, which it kind of actually is scarification. Right. So then, on 33, around 33, 34, and 35. So on page 33, it reads, um, he states that, oh, let me check. Okay, yeah. So he states on page 33 that all the males and females were trained in the arts of war. He states that the first object which saluted my eyes when I arrived on the coast was the sea and a slave ship. So there was a slave ship there waiting to be loaded. I was now persuaded that I had gotten into a world of bad spirits. So basically, he likened the Gawaiian and the people, the enslavers, as bad spirits, and that they were going to kill me. No, no, no. This is definitely about the Gawaiian, the Edomites. They were going to kill me. Their complexion, because he mentions their complexion too, differing so much from ours, their long hair and the language they spoke. Right. So what he's referring to there is like what you could call the first contact with the demonites. So what this also proves, which we've kind of known as well, is that the ones that actually were snatching them up, grabbing them up, and bringing them to the slave coast was actually either Jakes or Hamites, right? Either Jakes or Hamites, right? But they was, uh, let's say, use the term skin folk. So when his first mention of the Edomites is when he got to the coast, right? So not the interior. Right, so on page 34 and 35, 34 and 35, right? Verse 34, it reads, I asked them if we were not to be eaten. I'm just going to read it verbatim. I asked them if we were not to be eaten by those white men with horrible looks. So the first mention of cannibalism is actually referring to Aisha, right? Red faces, I couldn't have said it better, right? And long hair, I couldn't have said it better. And then on page 35, let me see what's there. Yeah, but still I feared I should be put to death. Verbatim, the white people looked and acted as I thought in so savage a manner, for I had never seen among any people such instances of brutal cruelty, and this not only shown towards us blacks, but also to some of the whites themselves. So the funny thing about this is, it's a Hebrewism, but what it's also showing you is a statement of fact. Because the thing about these people is they're very warlike people, right? Because that's the blessing they had by the edge of the sword. So when there's no other groups of people amongst them to bully and conquer and rape, pillage and plunder, they do it to themselves. And that's why they enslaved a group of their own people called the Slavic people. That's where the term slaves come from. That's why the Anglo-Saxon Edomites came to England and enslaved the people that were here and put them in serfdom. So they were called serfs. And then they took their show on the road and went to other nations and did the same thing. So they did it to themselves first, which I'm sure they were doing in the caves as well. But they did it to themselves first, and then they took their show on the road. That's what this is basically saying to me, anyway. So then after page 35, I jump to page 43 and 44. So we're sailing through, sailing through. Um, yeah. So this is page 43. Right. So notice the heading, Iron Muslim. The significance of an iron muzzle is that the iron muzzle is actually a variation of the yoke of iron. So you have the yoke of iron, which would be the iron collar, but then they had versions of it with a muzzle attached to it, or even a head thing there and a mouth thing there attached to it as well. But they all can be headed under yokes of iron because it fits around your neck. Yeah. So let me read it. Um, we were landed up a river a good way from the sea, about Virginia County. Right. So the significance of the Virginia County is that the coast of Virginia was actually an incorporated area or space. So the Virginia Company of England, they seized that portion of land and they called it the Virginias. Right. So he's referring to that area, but the term Virginia actually links to Virginia Company. So the fact that he's using the term Virginia means that he was in the British owned portion of the Americas. Right. So after saying that, let me continue reading it. We landed up a river a good way from the sea, about Virginia County, where we saw few or none of our native Africans, and not one soul which could talk to me. Right. So this matches the Pan Africans who are predominantly in New York, Harlem, in North America, because that area is actually all known as the Virginia County, believe it or not. So wherever the British was, from New England, which would be Plymouth Rock, New England, all the way down to the Carolinas, that whole area there was Virginia County, believe it or not. So what he's saying is that there was few or none of the native Africans and not one soul who could talk to him. Whereas when he was in the west coast of Africa, all of the lands that he passed through, with the exception of one, they had similar languages, and morals, and language. Right. So he's stating here it could be interpreted in two ways. One, that the people that were there had already been broken, so that they no longer had a knowledge of their customs, their culture, their manners, and their languages, which I find that hard to believe if they were indigenous, so there would still be traces of it. Or B, that the people that were there were speaking English or speaking French or speaking Spanish. So therefore, they had lost their indigenous language, and as a result of that, could no longer communicate with somebody that was speaking a variation of Hebrew. Because clearly the language they're speaking is a variation of Hebrew. Because I'm looking at their names and I could tell you what it means. So that means it was a variation of Hebrew. But anyway, be that as it may, 43 and then 44. So what's on 44? Oh yeah, here we go. So the reason why I'm reading this one, because the title of this chapter is Iron Muzzle. So this is dealing with the Iron Muzzle now. I had seen a black woman slave as I came through the house who was cooking the dinner, and the poor creature was cruelly loaded with various kinds of iron machines. She had one particularly on her head which locked her mouth so fast that she could scarcely speak and could not eat or drink. Right? So that's the way that they were dealing with our people, which links up with the curses as well. And then, what is it? Um, it states in Deuteronomy 28, 48 to 50. So I'm going to read that. Right. So I think that's the curses that's referring to what he's talking about. Because remember, the topic is Hebrewism. So So Hebrewism is basically you're looking at what somebody's mentioning from the perspective of the Bible. Alright, so that's the definition of Hebrewism. So Deuteronomy 28 and verse 48 states that therefore shalt thou serve thine enemy, which the Lord Yahweh shall send against thee in hunger and thirst, because you couldn't eat, you couldn't drink, and in nakedness, and in want of all things, and he, or in this instance he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck, in this instance her neck, until he have destroyed thee. Right? Because what it does, it destroys your will, it destroys your psyche, which is your self worth. So once you've destroyed somebody's psychology and psyche, they become submissive, and then basically you don't need to even to train them because they're going to do whatever you tell them to do. So to 50, so let me read 49. 49. The Lord Yahweh shall bring a nation against thee from far, listen to this, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, and the significance of the eagle doesn't miss me because the eagle is the bird that's likened to them. It's a bird of prey. A nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, which is what the brother was saying as well. Couldn't understand what they were saying. And then verse 50, listen to this. A nation of fierce countenance, he mentioned that when he first saw them, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. Because the scripture states that you're not supposed to be a respecter of persons, right? So this is in fair and sound judgment. You're not supposed to respect persons. But they represent the wicked, the left-hand side. So on the left-hand side, they were doing the same thing. So they were not respecting the person of the old. Let me get it. They were not respecting the person of the old, nor showing favor to the young, nor showing favor or respect to the females or the males either. Right. So this is actually proving that they are left-hand side workers of iniquity. Right. It's proving it. And then let's see. Um, page 51. Right. Yeah. So we're getting through. So on page 51 it states, I'm going to show you first. Page 51. I saw but was amazed at their not sacrificing or making any offering and eating with unwashed hands and touching the dead. I likewise could not help remarking the particular slenderness of their women. So what that's pointing out, right, is that there's an obvious difference between um, Aisha wa Adawam, Hagawayim, wa Bani Shal Yasha'ala. Right? In other words, there's a difference between Hebrew Israelites and the Edomites. Let's put it like that. There's a difference. And one of the differences is when it comes to the women are slender in the hips, right? Whereas our women are quite curvy, right? And that's a natural thing. Um, so he goes on further to say, which I did not at first like. So when he first saw their women, he didn't like them, but he grew to like them. And I thought they were not so modest and shamefaced. So that's a Hebrewism as well. Because our women are commanded to be modest. Right? Shamefaced means basically you're not bold faced, like looking at a man bold faced in his face and looking at his parts or whatever. You're not doing that. You're coy and you're modest. That's the best way to put it. And then page 64. Right, so page 64 is an important one, right, and the reason why it's important, which I'm going to explain, page 64, right, the reason why it's important, because he's actually explaining why and how our people turn into coons. So there's a process that changes a rebellious or a warrior-like Hebrew Israelite into an effeminate beta male coon. And one of the processes that is used in order to assist in that process is listed out here. So I'm going to read it and you're going to see for yourself what's going on. So it reads, I could now speak English tolerably well. So which means prior to this period, when he was in Virginia, when he was in the islands, he wasn't able to speak English tolerably well. So now he can speak English tolerably well. And I perfectly understood everything that was said. So he could speak it pretty well, but he understood everything, which is what happens when you learn a new language. Because I understand more Spanish and Portuguese than I can speak. I'm speaking less now than I could because I hardly use it. But I understand much more than I can speak. And that's the way you learn. You kind of understand, and then eventually, that's what's happening with the Hebrew. So I understand the Hebrew more than I can speak it. I know quite a lot of brothers that are better Hebrew speakers than me, but I understand the words. Let me see. Read it again. I could now speak English tolerably well, and I perfectly understood everything that was said. Listen to this. I no longer looked upon them as spirits, right? So before when he was in his right mind, he saw them as something alien and something different, right? But now he saw them but as men superior to us. So now this is explaining the effect of the buck breaking process. So prior to the buck breaking and the manipulation and the destruction of the self image, you would look at anything or anyone that was different to you as inferior to you because you're supposed to love yourself and by extension anybody that looks like you. But what's happened here now, according to him, when he learned the English and he was able to understand what they were saying, his mind frame changed, and now rather than seeing them as inferior, he saw them as superior to us, and therefore I had the stronger desire to resemble them. So that's why you see some of the brothers lightening the skin and perming their hair and bleaching up the skin and using the mannerisms of the Goyim, right? So he's explaining it here to imbibe their spirit and imitate their manners, right? So this is explaining how that process occurs, right? And this can be used in a court because this is an eyewitness account of somebody that experienced this. Um, right. So after page 64, I jump to page 78, and then it finishes, well. So let's go to page 78. Right. Okay. Page 78. It reads, I thought I could very plainly trace the hand of God, without whose permission a sparrow cannot fall. I began to raise my fear from man. So what he's explaining here now is that he started to correct his buck broken mind. But how did he do that? He did that because he learned to read. And he learned to read the Bible. It's going to explain it further. But when he learned to read, and he learned to read the Bible, that corrected his mind because his mind was going off to where he was seeing the heathen ways, which was listed out in Maccabees as well. When they saw the Greekish fashions and they um, submitted themselves to the Greekish fashions because they thought it was better than theirs, right? What corrected him was the Hathawara. It corrected him. But anyway, let me read it again. I thought I could very plainly trace the hand of God, Yahweh power, without whose permission a sparrow cannot fall. I began to raise my fear from man to him alone, and to call daily on his holy name, Kalala Yahweh, wa Sham, Yahweh Shai, wa Harukakadash, and reverence, and I trust he heard my supplication, and the chances are he did, because if he was keeping the law, statutes, and commandments, and he had the faith, the Most High hears the prayers of sinners. So he hears the prayers of those who love him and those who keep the commandments, right? And graciously condescended to answer me according to his holy word. So he's speaking as the oracle of the Most High, right? And to implant the seeds of piety in me, which is meekness and humbleness, even one of the meanest of his creatures. So that's illustrating his humbleness, so which means he was in the right spirit. So I just want to bring up a precept, right, that illustrates the concept he's bringing out. And also, it's because it's one of my new, recently favorite precepts, so I'll read it. This is the book of Ecclesiasticus, otherwise known as Sirach, chapter 18, verses 2 and 3. Verse 2. The Lord Yahweh alone is righteous. Right? So you can call him Yahweh Tazadak or Yahweh Tazadakia. And there is none other but he. Shema Yashahala, Yahweh Alahayanawa, Yahweh Akkad. There's none other but Yahweh. Verse 3. Who governeth the world with the palm of his hand, and all things obey his will, for he is king of all, Malak Shalkal, right? King of all, by his power dividing holy things among them from profane. So that kind of illustrates what he said in that verse, right? And then let's see. So and I wrote in the notes too. In their captivity, they remember themselves. So he was in captivity. He lost himself when he learned English, but he remembered himself, which is being illustrated here. And then read page 84. So let me get page 84. So I hope you're starting to see all of the many Hebrewisms that are found in this particular book, and I urge Israel Yasha'Allah to purchase this book or download it, right? So if you're going to download the book, you have to download the book with the other title that I read out for you, right? Let me just read it out again. If you want to download it, because in that manner you'll be able to download it easily, because the copyright is long gone off of this one. So if you want to download it, you download it. The, the interesting narrative of the life of Olaudah Equiano, otherwise known as Gustavus Vassa, the African, and is written by himself. So if you type that in, right, or even type this in, what is written there, you'll get the PDF for it. And by the way, this image, this is an etching. So the significance of the etchings is that they cannot be altered because it's a carving. So what they do, they carve the image in reverse, and then when they print, it reverses back to the correct side. So it's carved. So you can deface it and destroy it, but you can't alter it. So there's an etching also of King James that we use sometimes to prove to people that King James was a Hebrew Israelite, because in the etching it's got an afro and its features are more Negro in its features in the etching. So anyway, yeah, I urge everybody to download that. So let's get back to the lesson now. So on page 84, it states the Bible explained in many passages. Oh, wait. Go back. Right. So he's referring to a person called Daniel Queen. So Daniel is actually a derivative of Daniela, and Queen in the Hebrew would be a Malaika. Yeah, Malaika or Malaka. The H at the end, Malaika. He taught me to shave and dress hair a little, and also to read in the Bible. So this is the reason why he started to correct his damaged view, self-image view, because he had an acquaintance with him that was versed in the Bible, that was telling him about the Bible, and eventually taught him how to read the Bible. So the beauty of the Bible, the Haftarah, Watanak, is that it will correct and reset your mindset back to its original setting once it's read correctly and once the Spirit is placed in you. But anyway, read that again. Page 84, the Bible explained in many passages to me, which I did not comprehend, and this is a fact because you have to be taught. I was wonderfully surprised to see the laws and rules of my country, the Haftarah of my country, written almost exactly here. So that's a Hebrewism. A circumstance which I believe tended to impress our manner and custom more deeply on my memory. So what this is actually saying is that when he learned the English and started to understand the English, he started to bug out and he started to yearn to be like the Goliath, right? So in other words, he started to do that Maccabees 1 and 2 thing where he started to fashion himself after the Greekish fashions. Because really, all the Goliaths have Greekish and Roman fashion. So what happened was, when he started to read the scriptures, his his memory of who he was started to come back to him. He started to remember himself, and also there were things that he had forgotten that came back to memory. Right. So in like I stated earlier, in their captivity, they will remember themselves. He started to remember himself, and also it has listed here that they styled me or they labeled him basically the black Christian. So this is significant because what they did to him, right? I'm bearing in mind, I could show you the precept that states that the Christians were first called let me get that. Let me get that. Acts. So I don't want to paraphrase it and muck it up. So I'm just precept. Uh, okay, right. So which one do I want to bring up first? Um, right. So what I'll do, I'll bring out where it was first called Christian, and then I'll bring out the other. So this is the book of Acts, chapter 11, and verse 26, and it reads, oh, so like here, verse 25, because I want to show the context. Then departed Barnabas to Tarsus for to seek Saul. So Saul's name was translated or changed to Paul. So Saul and or Paul is the same individual, right? And he wrote most of the letters found in the New Testament. So he's a very instrumental figure in the New Testament. So Barnabas went to Tarsus to see Saul, verse 26. And when he had found him, so he found Saul or Paul, he brought him unto Antioch, which is in Greece. And it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the church and taught much people. So church just means called out assembly or the congregation of Yasha'Allah. That's what it means. And the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch. So two things I have to mention here. One, when they were called Christian, it wasn't seen as a good thing. It was labeled. They were labeled Christian because our Lord and Savior, right, our big brother, his name is Yahweh Shai, and his title would be Hamashiach, which means the Savior or the Anointed One, right? So if you call him Christian, although Christ means the same thing in Greek, what you've done, you've labeled them because they would not call themselves Christian. They would call themselves, if anything, Hamashiachim, right? That's what they would call themselves. So you calling them Christians is basically naming their movement and labeling them with a name that they would not ordinarily call themselves. But be that as it may, what this is showing you is that disciples of Yahweh Shai Mashiach were called Christians. when you're talking about Christians, initially you're talking about the disciples of Yahushua and Mashiach. That's what you're talking about. And then when you go to Acts chapter 13 and verse 1, it states, there was in the church the called assembly that was at Antioch. That's the same Antioch that we mentioned before. Certain prophets. So to be a prophet, you have to be a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's even found in the Quran. And teachers as Barnabas, that's the same Barnabas that went to find Saul or Paul, and Simeon, or Shemaiah one, that was called nigger. So when you go into the Strongs, the pronunciation of nigger, the pronunciation of niger is actually nigger, right? So anybody could do that. There's many camps that have illustrated that. But I don't have the technology available because I don't have a smartphone to do it. Otherwise I would have done it for you. But it's actually nigger. And the other one, Lucius of Cyrene. So Cyrene is actually North Africa as well. Um, right, so that's just illustrating the points that he mentioned. Um, the black, so the black would be Niger, because Niger or Negro or nigger all mean black in Latin, different Latin variation. And Christian, I showed you that as well. The disciples were first called Christians at Antioch, right? So I just did that just to clean up this statement here and link it to the scriptures as well. Because we have to speak as oracles of the Most High. So I can't just speak out of my neck. Well, I can, but I'm ordered not to. So what I have to do is, as much as possible, link up anything I say or anything I read with the scriptures to keep myself in straight and narrow path. And then, we're nearly finished. Yeah, go to verse 100, then 104. Let me go to 100 first. Right, and it reads, verse 100, it reads, I have even known them. So he's referring to the Edomite Goans as usual. I have even known them gratify their brutal passions with females not 10 years old, because they are inherently pedophiles. That's why they like the women with no hips. That's why they see, when you look at a European model, they're very skinny and very straight. That's their epitome of beauty. Our epitome of beauty is the hourglass shape, curvaceous, but they like them, straight. So obviously they would be attracted to a 10-year-old, because a 10-year-old would just be more or less before they start to full up, before the puberty kicks in. So that they would find them attractive. So let me read it. I have even known them gratify their brutal passion with females not 10 years old, and these abominations which they are, some of them practice to such scandalous excess that one of our captains discharged the mate and others on that account. So they were doing it so much and so badly and destroying the cargo so much, because with them everything's about profit. So if you damage the merchandise, then they're gonna have a problem. So they were damaging the merchandise. So and then it states, and yet in Montserrat I have seen a Negro man stick to the ground and cut most shockingly, and then his ears cut off bit by bit. Now this to me conjures up two images. One, it conjures up the image of the famous image of a buck breaking scene where a Jake, a muscly Jake, is staked down to the ground with his buck cheeks split open, and then the Edomite standing behind him, and then I think it was a brother, it could be another Edomite with a whip. But the significant thing was that the man's wife and child was there witnessing the scene, because that's what destroys the self-image. So the self-image of a child is the parents, and the protector would ordinarily be the father. So when you destroy that image, what you've now done is reverse the polarity. So now you see the children hiding behind mom and seeing mom as the protector and seeing the dad as weak. So that's what destroys the nuclear family. That's what has successfully destroyed our family system or family structure. So he's listing that out. Let me see. Oh, so there's a beautiful bit here. So I'm going to show you this bit here. So I've got the precept there. This bit here. Right. Right. So basically, let me read it and then I'll bring up the precept. I told him, so he was speaking to somebody else, and he told that person that the Christian doctrine, well, I've defined who the Christians are, so the Hebrew Israelite doctrine taught us to do unto others as we would that others should do unto us, right? So I'm going to bring out a piece up for that. Revelations 13 and 9. Revelations chapter 13 and verse 9. Let me bring that out. So actually, Olaudah was actually bringing it out. He was prophesying. He was in the spirit, right? And he was speaking as the oracle of the Most High. So he actually was illustrating, even at that time, what it is to be a Hebrew Israelite. So let me read it out. There's a book of Revelation, chapter 13 and verse 9. If any man have an ear, let him hear. So this is to one and to all. Verse 10. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. And you know what? Because it says saints, I'm going to go into Psalm, I think it's Psalm 49. I know it's the last verse in Psalm. Yeah, so it is. Psalms 41, 49. Verses 5 to 8 to 9. I'm just going to read the whole thing. Verse 5. That the saints, because it spoke about the saints patiently waiting in Revelations 39 and 10. Let the saints be joyful in glory. Let them sing aloud upon their beds. Verse 6. Let the high praises of Yahweh Ba'asham, Kalala Yahweh Ba'asham Yahushai, be in their mouth and a two-edged sword in their hand. Verse 7. To execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishment upon the people. Right? So the heathen gonna get it, and the people gonna get it as well. Well, when we say the people, we're talking about Yashala. That would be the two-thirds. They're gonna get it as well. Verse 8. To bind their kings with chains and the nobles with fetters of iron. So he listed out what they were doing to our people. Verse 9. To execute upon them the judgment written, this honor have all his saints. Praise ye the Lord. Kalala Yahweh. Ba'ashem HaMashiach Yahushua. Right, so after saying that, where are we now? Page 104. Let me go to page 104 and see what's going on now. Page 104, what's going on now? Ooh, yeah, I'm going to show you this. Right. It's not asterisk, or I didn't put any asterisks to it, but there's something there that's very, very crucial, so I'm going to read it. Very crucial, because what it is, it's explaining a psychological technique of creating distrust and also separation between a family. Right, so let me read it out. Uh, right. I have often asked many of the men, slaves, who used to go several miles to their wives and late in the night after having been wearied with a hard day's labor. So he asks a question, why they went so far for wives? So they had a habit of marrying women very, very far away from where they were, right? And the funny thing is, when I was a young lad growing up in Trinidad, I remember we had a similar custom. So, although there was very beautiful women that lived in the area I grew up in, we had a tendency to want to get girls, get women in different locations rather than where we were from, right? So this is something that we used to do, but this is actually listing out why. And I'm quite sure people in Jamaica and other areas could attest to that as well. But this is listing out why we did that. So let me read it again. I've often asked many of the men slaves, and then in parentheses it reads, who used to go several miles to their wives late in the night after having been wearied with a hard day's labor. Why they went so far for wives? Why did they not take them of their own masters' Negro women, and particularly those who lived together as household slaves? In other words, why you don't take the women that are on the plantation or in the house, in master's house, right? So here the answer now. The answer have ever been because when the master or mistress choose to punish the women, so if the women do anything wrong and they're to be punished, listen to what they do. They make the husbands flog their own wives, and that they could not bear to do. So that's a form of psychological torture. Not only are you torturing the woman by beating her, but you're causing her love, her other half, the rib of the other half, the person who's supposed to be a protector, a comforter. You're causing that person to inflict the hurt on her. So that creates a psychological instability that will forever create a war or a friction within the household. How can you reconcile that? You can't. And this is why they did that. Right? Right, so that's what's on 104. Then after 104, let's jump to 110. Let me see what's on 110. Eight, nine. Oh, we're nearly there. Um, oh, yeah, so this is not part of it either, but I'm going to bring this out as well. Because we're looking for Hebrewisms. So look at that. The precept's there, but I just want you to look at it. I'm going to read it and then I'm going to read the precept, right? So listen to this. This artless tale moved me much, and I could not help feeling the just cause, right? So just, Yahweh is the God of the just. And just, to be just is to be in the law, statutes, and commandments. So just is an equivalent of righteous, which is an equivalent of perfect. So these terms equivalent or they relate to each other. So let me get back to it. Feeling the just cause Moses had in redressing his brother against the Egyptians, I exhorted the man to look up still to the God Yahweh power on the top, since there was no redress below. So in other words, he's saying we have to rely in God rather than men. So he's speaking as an oracle. Don't put your trust in men. Don't rely on a man, right? But he's also he is he's speaking about the way in which Moses loved his brother like as himself, right? So the same way he saw his brother being beaten, and to him it was as if he was being beaten. So he looked left, he looked right, he saw nobody was looking, And actually, let me bring it out. Exodus 2:11 and 12. Let me bring it out. So let me rely on the scriptures rather than my own words. So this is the book of Exodus, chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. Verse 11. And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens. So even though he grew up as a prince, he grew up within the royal family, he still had that sense of empathy and that sense of love for his people. So he went to, you know, see what's going on with them. And he espied, he saw an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew. So that verse there is giving you a clear distinction between the two. They're not the same. The Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he's letting you know that he's a Hebrew as well. Verse 12. And he looked this way, he looked that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Right? He got rid of the evidence. He took him out, got rid of the evidence. And by the way, this is not likened as a sin, because this would be, the Hebrew word for this would be haragium, right? Which is righteous killing, right? So the word that they use for murder is a separate Hebrew word. When you look at the Decalogue stone in Las Lunas, New Mexico, and you look at the word they have on the thou shalt not, don't do that, don't, it's not thou shalt not, it's la'ada. The word there is the word that's translated as murder, not haragim, because haragim is righteous killing. So this would be a righteous killing, right? So yeah, that's that. And then we're going to jump to verse 110 and 111. Let me get that. So we're near enough finished. So you could see verse 1, page 110, and page 111 on the other side. So we read them out. The sides with the asterisk. When you make men slaves, you deprive them of half their virtue. You set them in your own conduct. Meaning, if your concept of life is to rape, pillage, and plunder, and to bully and dominate, the people that are subservient to you are going to see that as the model. That was illustrated in Maccabees. That was illustrated in the Roman Empire. That's illustrated in Babylon, right as we speak. So the term for it is capitalism, but it's basically illustrating the same concept. Um, an example of fraud, rapine, and cruelty, and compel them to live with you in a state of war, because they are always in a state of war. You stupefy them with stripes, you beat the shit out of them, and think it necessary to keep them in a state of ignorance. You ban them from reading under pain of death. I read that out in the black laws that they wrote after the abolition of slavery. And yet you assert that they are incapable of learning. So if you're not teaching a person and you ban them from reading under pain of death, why are you making the assertion that they're incapable of learning? If they were incapable of learning, you wouldn't have to ban them from reading because they couldn't learn anyway. So why would you ban them from reading? So that's an oxymoron. Um, why do you use those instruments of torture, right? But it's more psychological as well. But yeah, why do you do it? That's a rhetorical question. Are they fit to be applied by one rational being to another? No. That's why you have to dehumanize the group, right? Because if you think of a person as a human being or as equal to yourself, you cannot rightly employ these methods. So in order for you to do that and satisfy yourself as a human being, you have to dehumanize them, which is what they have done with us. And are ye not struck with shame and mortification, which is mortification would be fear and dread to the point of dropping down dead. and shame, well, no, they're not, because they're not shameful, and they don't suffer with mortification. They sleep very well at night. There's a term for them. They are actually in their construction. They are actually constructed with a wicked soul. But not only that, they are sociopathic. So a sociopath is a person that is incapable of empathy. They are incapable of feeling any kind of emotion for another person. They're very self-centered. So by doing that, they replace the Most High with themselves. So they put themselves first in everything. So it's a form of replacing the object of worship, which should be the Most High, with themselves. In other words, it's a form of self-worship. Uh, to see the partakers of your nature reduce so low. So we are actually not the partakers of their nature, because we are created inherently different. That's illustrated in Genesis 25. So and also it's illustrated earlier than that with Cain and Abel. So they have a different spirit. It's also in Job as well, Job 30. They have a different nature. They are the border of wickedness, and they are inherently sociopathic, meaning that they are incapable of feeling sorry or having empathy for other people, or even themselves, to be quite honest. But above all, are there no dangers attending this mode of treatment? Are you not hourly in dread of an insurrection? They actually were. But by changing your conduct and treating your slaves as men, every cause of fear would be banished. They would be faithful, honest, intelligent, and vigorous, and peace, prosperity, and happiness would attend you. So, what he finished it off with is actually what is going to happen. Because what's going to happen is when the Most High, when Yahushai Hamashiach cracks the sky and the Lord's day begins to unfold, this entire world is going to be judged and ruled and governed in righteousness. So what he wrote in the last verse of the last chapter, get back, um, they would be faithful, honest, intelligent, and vigorous, and peace, prosperity, and happiness would attend you, would attend everybody, but would attend us in particular, right? It's a prophetic statement. So to wrap up, what I would like to say would no. Before I wrap up, let me just give you some images to look at, right? Because this brother was a real brother. So I showed you this. This is an etching on the cover of his initial book, right? So that's exactly how he looked. But I want to show you another image now, right? So this is a color image, the portrait of him, and it's very, very lifelike. It's a very good image. So that image is almost as if it was a photograph. Very well done, very well, very lifelike. And now I'm going to show you something else, right? I actually found the brother's marriage certificate. So I want to illustrate this to let you people know that this brother actually did live, and that everything that he wrote about was true and correct. Right. So his wife's name was Susanna Cullen, and on the marriage certificate, there's two witnesses. One of them, let me show you there, is a Thomas Cullen. So I don't know if that was the brother or the dad of the wife, but he was a witness as well, right? So the brother was a real brother. I actually also have his will as well, right? I didn't print it, but I found his will, found his marriage certificate, I found the residence where he learned to read, right? Somewhere in London, I found all of that. So this brother was a real brother. So what I want to say in summation is that Hebrewism is a crucial element to us finding the truth. Because what it is, once you uncover the secrets contained in the Hathorah or Tanakh, once you diligently search the scriptures, once you apply the Isaiah 28, 9 and 10, I think it is, right, and you start to congregate with brothers who are versed in the scriptures and who kind of sit you in on unlocking the scriptures, once you do that, your brain starts to reset and correct, and then you can look at almost anything. And once you use the Bible to evaluate it, you can start to uncover or unpick or unpack the secrets contained in it. So that is, in my opinion, one of the abilities that the Most High gave me, right? So it's all Yahweh that is all His will. It's not of my own strength. But He gave me that ability, and this is one of the things that I choose to share with the brotherhood and the sisterhood as well. So, in closing, I would like to give all honors and prayers to Yahweh, Bahashem HaMashiach Yahweh Shai, Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahweh Shai, Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahweh Shai, Tawada Yahweh, Tawada Yahweh Shai, Tawada Yahweh, Tawada Yahweh Shai. And with that, I'd like to say, Kwam Yashala, and Mawapta Baba. Shalom, Israel.